Great, thank you, Kathy. I'll go ahead and get started then. Such a pleasure to be here with you, our Travel and Tourism Research Association community. So really nice that we've had each other to lean on throughout this crisis that is still ongoing. For those of you I haven't met yet, I'm Erin Cummings, the President and CEO of Destination Analysts. I'm going to share our latest findings on what Americans are thinking and feeling and how they're behaving around travel in the period of COVID-19 before I jump off and let David share with you the work we're doing empowering destinations with geolocation data, and really using that data in a way that answers their questions that are unique to their organizations and their destinations. So we at Destination Analysts, we're a team of market researchers. We serve the global travel and hospitality industries. What I'll be presenting to you today, our Coronavirus Travel Sentiment Index. It is independently produced research. It's created solely to help the travel industry navigate and recover from the COVID-19 crisis. The methodology, it's an online survey of 1,200 Americans who traveled in the pre-pandemic times from each of the 4 major regions of the US. We survey new travelers each week. After the data is collected, it's weighted by geography and demographics, and we've been conducting this survey every week since March 15th. And what I'll be sharing with you today reflects data collected this past weekend between December 4th and 6th. And this represents the 39th wave of this study. David and I still can't believe that we're heading into these types of numbers on it, but here we are. So I'm going to start with some context, and that's the summary of the headlines that Americans were seeing as they answered our questions this past weekend. Sadly, when it comes to the pandemic, it's grim here in the United States. Confirmed cases are now over 50 million. We've lost a staggering 288,000 Americans to this virus. And it was announced that COVID-19 has now surpassed heart disease as the current #1 killer of Americans. And where David and I are located, California, the most populous state in the union, we are now almost entirely under stay-at-home orders. The pandemic conditions here mirrored the rest of the country. Our hospital capacity plummeted over the last month. But of course, this made major news because it's California, and again, most populous state, but we are not alone. And there's restrictions on behaviors across the US to combat the spread of COVID. I wanted to share this story because this type of story has been in the news about the proliferation of harassment our hospitality workers are facing during the pandemic. It makes me question the longer-term impact this is going to have on our industry's ability to recruit and retain a workforce if our hospitality workers are currently receiving this type of treatment. But fortunately, we were blessed with some really good news this week. Important progress was made on another stimulus bill, and vaccines are here now, and the CDC even laid out its recommendations on who will be prioritized for these. So how are Americans feeling towards travel? How has that been impacted given all this news? 73.4% of Americans continue to have a high degree of concern about their friends or family contracting the virus. And as you can see in the time series on this metric, excuse me, this worry jumped up at the beginning of November, and it stayed at that level for the last 3 weeks. However, the percent of Americans with high concerns about personally contracting the virus had actually declined to 66.7%. And whether that's due to the imposition of new restrictions on their behaviors or just the greater knowledge and experience they have 9 months into this pandemic, this is among the lowest levels of anxiety Americans have expressed about personally contracting the virus. The percent of Americans with high degrees of concern about the virus's impact on their personal financial situation, that remained at 56% this week, and is illustrated by this chart, which is showing the average degree of concern on an 11-point scale. Americans are expressing a decreased level of anxiety about the virus's impact on their personal finances. What Americans have consistently worried most about, though, is the virus's impact on our national economy. That also remains stable, just dropping very slightly to 79.2%. Again, though, the intensity of this worry has decreased, dropping to a level that is the lowest achieved during the 9 months of this pandemic. Nevertheless, as Americans look out over the last month of 2020, it's clear they see a situation in this country that's deteriorating. This week, 63.4% feel things with the pandemic will get worse in the next month. Just 14.6% feel it will get better. Since September 20th, Americans' pessimism about the virus's course has been on a clear upward trajectory. That's that orange line here. Meanwhile, our optimism, which is the blue line, that's been on the decline, nearing historically low levels. In fact, if you look at the blue line over here on the right of this chart, Americans' comfort going out for leisure activities, even within their own community, has been in decline. This week, there was an increase in the percent of Americans who reported seeing things in the media about travel destinations where people were behaving in a manner related to the pandemic that would make them feel uncomfortable visiting. And then there was a significant increase in the percent who saw such stories that said this negative coverage made them less likely to visit those destinations in the next 6 months. That jumped up to 87.1% from 79.8% in just 1 week. This chart is showing you the percent of Americans who rate the 24 travel activities we track as unsafe. On average, travel activities rated as unsafe by 54.8% of Americans. And that's a slight increase from last week. However, although the virus's spread is greater and wider than ever, the perception of travel activities as unsafe has not returned to levels seen in the July and April surges, which is good news for travel. But despite there not being returned to the strong feelings that travel activities are unsafe, the current state of the pandemic has eroded Americans' confidence that travel can be done safely right now. Half feel not very or not at all confident they can travel safely in the current environment, and that's showing a steady climb since early October. Meanwhile, just 23.9% are confident or very confident travel can be done safely now, and that's down from nearly 1/3 saying that's just 6 weeks ago. Americans' mindset about travel has also shifted negatively for the industry. If you look over here at the blue line on the right of this chart, the percent in a ready to travel mindset declined to 52.5% after reaching highs at the start of November. And those that say their mindset around travel is being more hesitant, that's increased. Another important sentiment metric, the ability of discounts and deals to stimulate travel demand, as you can see in the blue line on the right of this chart, those that can be motivated by discounts and price cuts to travel in the near term dropped to 36% after hitting 40.3% 2 weeks ago. Half of Americans say they agree that travel should be limited to essential needs only, and nearing half say they would feel guilty traveling right now. So Americans' current feelings about the pandemic has had an impact on their likelihood to travel right now. However, we see that in many metrics that Americans are indicating a marketability for future travel. And I'll share those with you now. And then we also, just so you know, we hosted a panel of travelers, a mini focus group yesterday, and they confirmed a lot of this as well. Even saying they would be booking for a year from now if something was appealing to them. So first, those that agree they have lost their interest in travel for the time being, that dropped to 43.1%, down from a high of 50% last week. The proportion that agree they will partake in travel avoidance until the coronavirus situation is more blown over, that's at 49.7%, but that's been on the decline for the last 3 weeks. And this week, 49.4% of Americans said they would have a high degree of excitement if their friend asked them to take a getaway with them sometime next month, and that's up nearly 5% from last week. And the intensity of that excitement has started to recover. The proportion excited to learn about new travel experiences and destinations to visit improved to 44.2% from 40.6% last week. The intensity of the excitement also recovering after consistently declining for a month. And this is the Travel Marketability Predictive Index, which David has built and maintained for 39 weeks. And this is to help travel marketers have a sense of when and to who they should market travel to right now. So these are the 4 data points that David uses in that index to look at or predict Americans' travel marketability. And so those gains I showed you in excitement about a potential getaway, openness to travel inspiration, combined with a lesser worry about contracting the viruses and worry about personal finances, that's led to a shift to the right in this bell curve, with more Americans indexing as potentially marketable compared to the last few weeks, and being highly convertible. Of course, this is still not looking anywhere near normal times, but still we are seeing a shift towards the potentially marketable and more easily convertible side. This was unexpected given the news, so we looked at whether this overall result was driven by a certain segment of travelers, and what we found was no, this wasn't driven by a certain segment. It was across the board that Americans were exhibiting greater travel marketability right now for future travel. So in summary, while Americans continue to have the same high degrees of concern about their friends or family contracting the virus, concerns about personally contracting the virus and the virus's impact on personal finances and the national economy did drop in intensity. Nevertheless, Americans largely see the last month of 2020 as one in which the pandemic situation is going to worsen. The current state of the pandemic has eroded Americans' confidence that travel can be done safely. And that's had some impact on marketability for travel right now, but Americans are still demonstrating an openness to travel messaging and indicating travel marketability. And just so you know, those that we look at that are most ready to travel, they're the ones that have been taking trips throughout this pandemic. They're out for leisure activities in their own communities, and they're really looking for new experiences in 2021 when we ask them about their travel next year. Our research has shown consistently how positive an impact a COVID vaccine will be on stimulating the travel economy. I keep saying this is a monumental human achievement on developing this vaccine so quickly. But we have more clarity now on the timelines for production and distribution, and I think people have a sense of their place in line, what that will be for receiving a vaccine. And so what I like to call that Pfizer bump that you can see in the data after Pfizer's announcement ahead of the week of November 23rd. After the announcement, the percent of American travelers that said they wouldn't travel without a vaccine jumped way up to 46.7%, but it's dropped back down since. I think the announcement made people think they could get one quickly, and so then they wouldn't travel until then. But now they're more realistic about that. 44.7% of American travelers say definitely they will take the vaccine when it's available. When we ask those who say no, they will not, their reasons why, primarily in this group, they're concerned about the vaccine's safety and side effects. Among all American travelers, a majority do believe a COVID vaccine will be safe. 37.9% of parents who travel with their school-age children say they will get their children vaccinated. And back to that Pfizer bump again, now that it's, again, clear what timelines will be, I think that combined with the gloominess about the right now, some of the strong optimism initially felt about a COVID vaccine after Pfizer's announcement, that's become more muted. 3 weeks ago, 58.1% said vaccine developments made them more optimistic about life returning to normal in the next 6 months. And this week, the percent that still feels that way dropped to 49.1%. Similarly, the percent who say the recent vaccine developments made them more optimistic that they can travel safely in the next 6 months, that declined to 46% from 52.5% 3 weeks ago. So in summary, the gloominess combined with more clarity on timelines for production and distribution appear to have muted some of that really strong optimism initially felt about a COVID vaccine after Pfizer's announcement, specifically about if things will be back to normal and travel can be done safely within the next 6 months. Just under 45% of American travelers say they definitely plan on getting the COVID vaccine right now. The primary objections just being concerns about the vaccine's safety. So 2021 is upon us, and there's certainly a mood of hope and change around that. So let's see what Americans are thinking and feeling about travel in 2021. Of course, with an exercise looking forward, We as tourism researchers know it's always useful to look back on the travel that occurred throughout 2021, 2020, when less was known about and there was less experience with this virus, and that will help us frame what we might expect if certain circumstances return in the new year. So 2020, about 80% of American travelers took at least one trip in 2020. June and July being the months with the highest rate of travel post the onset of the pandemic and after the initial shutdowns. Lesser but relatively consistent numbers of Americans traveled in the fall months. 1 in 5 took a trip by air since the onset of the pandemic, while 60.4% have taken one or more road trips since March. Trip cancellations, though, specifically caused by the pandemic situation, that continued to occur throughout the year. We didn't really get a reprieve from that. The months from April through July incurred the most cancellations, but of course, as before, there's a sizable proportion of travelers that simply stop making plans at some point. So how do Americans expect to travel in 2021? Similar to what we see on our quarterly The State of the American Traveler study, during normal times, there's a third of Americans who expect to travel more for leisure in the next year than they did in the previous one. Probably no surprise. However, the percentage who say they're going to travel less for leisure is up dramatically from normal times. So only 6.7% of American travelers said that in January before COVID hit, which is our last measure of normal. And now that's at 19.9%. So we still have a road ahead in recovery. But as they look to what they spend their money on in 2021, over 47% of American travelers say they will prioritize leisure travel in their personal budgets. Again, this is significantly lower than what was reported in pre-pandemic times. So in January, 70.6% of American travelers said that they were going to prioritize leisure travel in their budget. Americans anticipate they'll take about 3 leisure trips on average in 2021. That's approximately 1 trip less than pre-pandemic. Don't let these comparisons to normal times bum you out. We've come a long way in these stats. If we look back to how Americans were answering these questions in May, we've made a lot of gains. And like normal times, the summer months of June and July look like they'll have the highest concentration of leisure trips in 2021. And later in the year, 45% of American travelers say they're going to take at least 1 trip between September and December 2021. Nearly 3/4 say they'll be taking trips for their personal leisure. Over half say they'll take a trip specifically to visit friends and relatives. And we asked about the types of destinations they would visit and have them report how many leisure trips they'd be taking to each. Cities and rural and small towns come up on top, followed by beaches. When we have them rate their excitement about potentially visiting these types of destinations, though, we see a different story. The excitement is really around beaches and outdoor spaces like national parks and mountain areas, getting the highest amounts of enthusiasm. We're seeing hotels still expected to be the most common lodging type. 15.5% plan on a vacation rental, 11.9% say they will be staying in an Airbnb or similar in 21. We asked Americans to write in the one experience they most want to have on their trips in 2021. And perhaps unsurprisingly, given the year that we've just experienced, fun is the top experience that people most agreed on. Relaxing, new, beach, adventure, and safe, also commonly desired. In terms of the experiences they'll prioritize, spending time with loved ones, getting away from crowds, enjoying nature, going to new places they haven't been before, excitement and energy, as well as budget travel will be key. And aligning with the one experience they want to have during their trips, Americans are really likely to prioritize having fun and relaxation when it comes to their 2021 travel. As to the most popular destinations Americans plan to visit in 2021, we had survey respondents write in the top 3 they plan to visit. Despite the challenges that these destinations have faced in the pandemic, Florida, New York, Las Vegas, and California do look like they will maintain their status as tourism powerhouses. Of course, that's different by generation and regions of the country, our travel tastes. If we look by generation, we see New York falls off for those in older generations, and in baby boomers, Yellowstone National Park. I know Jennifer's on in Wyoming, so that's great news for her. And if we look by region, attraction to destinations like Hawaii rises in the West, Colorado rises in the Midwest, and interesting to see that aspiration for Florida is really strongly driven by the Midwest and Northeast. But again, showing the challenges these popular destinations are going to face despite their tourism prowess. They also get named by Americans as, by those saying they'll avoid certain destinations. They come out on top of where people say they're going to avoid because of coronavirus. 1 in 5 say they anticipate traveling internationally next year. Unfortunately, a third still say they're going to take at least one staycation. We also asked a series of questions to gauge how optimistic Americans are about specific types of travel that were taken away from us in 2020. Amongst Americans who have traveled to attend a special event in the past 2 years, nearly 40% are optimistic or very optimistic that they'll be able to travel to attend such events again in 2021. Optimism to attend sporting events in 21 is even greater. Nearly half of sporting event travelers say they're optimistic they'll do that in 21. Half of past cruise travelers think they'll be able to cruise in 21. And lastly, on the convention side, over 40% feel optimistic about that, 44.6%. So the majority of American travelers took at least one trip in 2020, June and July, having the highest rate of travel post onset of coronavirus. Americans expect to take fewer trips in 21 than in normal times, and a smaller proportion will prioritize leisure travel in their personal budgets. But again, we'll take it, right? It could be worse. Travelers want to have and will prioritize 2021 experiences that are fun and relaxing. These tourism powerhouses will remain that way, of course, noting differences between generations and regions in the country, amongst other segments. And American travelers are optimistic about 21 for the types of sort of more group travel that we missed in 2020. Okay, so finally, we wanted to measure Americans' aspiration for taking schoolcations, workcations, and also get business travelers' perspective on what's going to happen in the new year. So we asked travelers with school-age children how interested they would be in taking a schoolcation next year with their family, and 43% said they would be interested or very interested. And when asked how likely they would be to do so in 21, 3 in 10 of this type of traveler said they'd be likely or very likely. And then this question came up in U.S. Travel Association's webinar last week on the outlook for travel, so we thought we'd try to answer it. So how will the availability or non-availability of vaccinations impact the summer travel season for traveling families? So we presented the scenario to our survey respondents who travel with school-aged children, that COVID-19 vaccines had been widely distributed for adults, but children had not yet been widely vaccinated, and their own children had not. And would that situation be likely to stop them from taking a family vacation next summer? Well, 1 in 3 said that this would not likely stop them from traveling, but we do have a quarter that said it would. And another quarter said they would have to assess the situation before making that decision to travel. So it does appear that a lack of availability of vaccinations for school-aged children may deter some family travel next summer. Now for workcations, we asked employed Americans if their job allows them to work remotely, and over half this group said they can. Those with the ability to work remotely were then asked how interested they would be in taking a workcation sometime in 21, and well over half said they would be interested or very interested. In terms of the likelihood of them actually doing this, 36.4% said they have some likelihood. And with the pandemic's drastic impact on the working life for many Americans, again, we wanted to gather business travelers' perspectives on the longer term changes they anticipate in how their employers approach business travel. just under half of Americans who have traveled for business in the last couple of years feel that indeed COVID will change the business travel dynamic. And when asked what changes they anticipate over the longer term, over half said they think their company will have just fewer overall business trips. 37% anticipate there are going to be more webinars and virtual meetings that will replace this type of travel, and just under a third feels that there'll be shorter trips, and that'll be more the norm post-COVID. So 3 in 10 Americans who travel with school-age children said they're likely to take a schoolcation in 21. Meanwhile, over a third of Americans whose jobs allow them to telecommute say they're likely to take a workcation next year. 45.6% of past business travelers feel their employers will change business travel in the long term, and the top expectations for how COVID is going to change business travel in the longer term include fewer overall business trips, more webinars and virtual meetings, and when travel does occur, shorter business trips may be the norm. So to wrap up all those findings, I want to leave you with one final thing. Several times during this pandemic, we've asked in our survey for Americans to write in what one word describes how you feel about travel right now. So here's a look back on how this has been answered throughout these 9 months. Americans predominantly associating travel with fear, caution, being unsafe. So how do they answer this question when they think about 2021? And the answer is they're excited, signaling a major shift in optimism about travel in the new year, and really blessed news, I think, to us all. Thank you so much. I have to jump off for another meeting, but David can answer any questions about this research. He and I have been working very intimately with it for the last 39 weeks, now going into 40 weeks. So I'll leave you in David's good and capable hands. It was so nice to be on here with all of you. And I'm looking forward to continue to be part of our tourism research community into 2021. Thanks for joining. Take care, everyone.
Awesome. So I saw a number of questions come in the chat, and I'm going to attempt to do my best to address some of them. First question that came in from Jennifer was asking about how the health department is planning to deploy marketing efforts to encourage the public to take the vaccine. And she asked, do we think that tourism should also play a role in helping educate people about getting vaccinated? I think, Jennifer, the easy answer to that question is yes. We should all play a role in getting out the best and most reliable information. We have, over the last number of weeks, asked a number of questions on the impact of the vaccine on different traveler perceptions. One of my favorites, and that comes to mind from just recently, was this perception question on asking travelers, if you knew that everyone on your flight had been vaccinated, would that make you more confident that traveling on that plane would be safe? And predominantly huge answers of yes. You know, it's not a far stretch to say that if you know that everyone who's visiting a particular destination, if you know that getting vaccinated was a requirement to, say, go to a particular park or highly recommended, that definitely shows boosts in consumer confidence, and definitely will drive more travel. So obviously, you know, some of that might be political. So Jennifer, that's not an easy answer for everyone, but I think it's all of our responsibilities to get out the best and most reliable information so that travelers know how to travel safely. Deanne asked a great question on pointing out that BTN today revised down their projections for the lodging industry. And with what we're seeing, she asked if an occupancy of about 52.7% is overly optimistic for anticipated overall occupancy for 2021. I don't, from what I've seen with projections using STR data, which I think are pretty reliable, I don't think that's overly optimistic. But the hard truth is that no one has the exact crystal ball on that. You know, the leading economists right now are saying that travel and even just total overall economic recovery is going to be slow until there is widespread vaccination, at which point we will see huge dramatic shifts up both in the economy overall and in travel. So depending on how soon the vaccine gets distributed, that overall occupancy might be a low ball estimate, but no one really knows that for sure. There was another question that came in. How has the destination choice changed compared to pre-pandemic, particularly in small towns versus metro areas, outdoor park versus highly populated venues like a theme park? Great question. We have seen in a number of weeks, multiple waves, that consumers' outlook for 2021, well, let me take a step back. Consumer interest in visiting smaller towns versus larger metro areas, and versus more outdoor destinations versus more populated places like a theme park. That's definitely been true and very strongly a preference shift during the time of the pandemic. When we ask travelers to look forward at 2021 and where they're most optimistic about visiting, we have seen a return to pre-pandemic interests. It's not everyone, and so there will be some opportunity, we still think, for those destinations that maybe aren't in that top tier of interest to really make some strive and some growth, because there will be a lot of travelers even after everyone has the vaccine that are still planning to avoid crowds because they want to be safer and still want to have more outdoor destinations in their repertoire. So there's definitely still going to be some preference, but we have seen that shift back toward pre-pandemic interests as we ask travelers to look forward to 2021. We will definitely keep you updated if we continue to see that trend change. One last question came in on, not sure we have clarity yet about the distribution or access to the vaccines. That is true. Kids may not be vaccinated till after the summer. Do we think all the survey respondents had a common standard of understanding of when the vaccine will be distributed? So this is specifically for that question that Aaron was talking about that we asked this week on whether if your kids were not vaccinated, would you still travel? In that question, we specifically gave them the situation with all the assumptions laid out, that the vaccine has been widely distributed to adults, has not been widely distributed to children, and your children have not gotten it yet. So that was kind of the setting we gave them, and then asked them whether or not that situation would impact their decision to travel or not. And we saw about half, 25% said that they would not travel, and another 25% said that they would assess the situation at that time. Only about a third said that in that situation they would still travel regardless. So that is all the questions that came in chat on Aaron's presentation. If there are any more questions about that research, I am happy to discuss them. We was for vaccine and other. Got it. Thank you for the clarification, Andy. Because no one really knows exactly how the vaccine is going to be distributed, we have to ask travelers' perceptions about how they feel about it right now, because that's the best learning that we can have. But anyway, I would love to take some time to show you what we're now working on in terms of best practices using geolocation data. We have had a number of clients come to us with questions that need to be answered in this crazy time of crisis that at this point don't otherwise have great solutions. As researchers, we love to be creative and innovate and find new best ways to answer questions. So I want to walk you guys through this one case study, which obviously could be taken in a number of different directions, but it's one that I think we can learn a lot from, which is why I want to show it to you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and talk about it. So we recently had the pleasure of starting this project with Visit Santa Barbara. They needed to know a lot about their visitors right now during COVID. We because of California's lockdown and restrictions throughout the pandemic in the last many months, we have not had a chance to be out there in the field asking visitors questions, but they've seen their occupancy rise month over month. They've seen their hotels get full, and they've needed to know where their visitors are coming from and what they're doing in market and how long they're staying. These are great questions that geolocation data actually can answer really, really strongly. There are lots of things that Santa Barbara did not want to try to answer with geolocation data, things that they didn't have a ton of confidence in. And so, respecting their view on that, we decided to help them as best we could, answer the questions we could. One of the biggest goals for this project was to be able to market to what they call top performing micro markets. One of the things that is true for Visit Santa Barbara, and I'm sure it's true for a lot of other destinations, is that pre-pandemic you had a substantial marketing budget, at least that's the situation they were in, where they could say target all of the Los Angeles metro area, just as a blanket, target the area because they had enough money to do so. And that is no longer true at this time. They still have marketing budget to go out and get visitors, and they need to raise awareness about what is open in Santa Barbara right now and what's safe to do there and how to safely travel and experience the great Santa Barbara South Coast region and get home safely again. But LA is extremely populous, and it's almost impossible right now with limited budgets to market to the entire metro area. And so what they've decided they could do on the technical side was be very strategic with their digital marketing and with their digital video, their social media marketing, to be able to market to specific zip codes. They've used a number of metrics to decide which zip codes that they're going to focus on and target throughout the entire state. And one of those is past visitation. Not just past visitation pre-pandemic, but current past visitation during the time of the pandemic. So the actual data that you're looking at is data that started in April. So April through October. I don't think we have November's data in their dashboard yet, but we will very soon. What they have been doing is filtering, looking at just specific segments of their either hotel properties or different attractions that they want to visit. So if we look at just their, they have a TBID in Visit Santa Barbara, their Tourism Business Improvement District, and they've definitely been looking at, say, the visitors who come to visit, who come to the Santa Barbara South Coast area. I'm currently filtering by just the last couple months and have stayed in one of their most luxury properties. If they were putting out a luxury campaign, for example, and they needed to know where the most volume is coming from within the LA market, they can now do that with a lot of reliability and understand exactly which zip codes are the best places to target. When I asked the team at Visit Santa Barbara to kind of give me their takeaway from this, why this has been so strategic, there are 41 million Californians that they could market to. And they definitely don't have enough budget to reach all 41 million, but understanding where their top performing micro markets are within the state, they've been able to successfully target that down and filter that 41 million down to 14 million, which is much more manageable. And they don't just use past visitation, they also overlay on this a number of metrics that they use as predictive for future intent to visit. The point here is that they haven't been able to do this with any other type of research before, and that's why it's so powerful to jump in here and look at the zip code level where their visitors are coming from during the time of the pandemic. They're also noticing, and now we're not just looking at zip codes, we're looking at whole states. They're also noticing that their out-of-state visitation is increasing over time. So if we filter, and I'm currently looking at just out-of-state visits to the Santa Barbara South Coast area right now. If we look early on in the pandemic in April and May, we see, Nevada and Arizona are really the strongest. If we filter that to the most recent couple months, October and September, we see Arizona and Texas jump up hugely. And um, uh, there's actually an exercise that the team did that I wanted to share with you on how useful this has been. Let me see if I can also share that. Okay, so what you're looking at right now, and I've taken out the actual numbers because they've asked me not to share exact figures with you, but this is an exercise that the Visit Santa Barbara team did just recently where they, from Smith Travel Research, from STR, they've measured their hotel occupancy month over month to see exactly sort of since the pandemic started, when the recovery was really starting to take effect, and kind of where it's plateaued. August, September, and October have kind of downward a little bit, but it's staying pretty consistent where it is. We then overlay on top of that from their geolocation data, understanding the relative visitor mix of in-state versus out-of-state. Obviously, in-state is still the primary visitation to Santa Barbara just in the last couple months, but you can see and it may be difficult to see without the numbers, but I will tell you, because I have looked at these figures, that July, August, September, and October have seen increasing visitation from out of state in terms of the proportion of the overall hotel audience. I should have mentioned, just in case you have questions, that a really important point about the geolocation data project that we're doing for Santa Barbara is that we're only looking at hotel guests. That's actually one thing that makes this project a lot different from other geolocation data resources that you might be using, is that we purchased a raw data set on behalf of Visit Santa Barbara and filtered it down a number of times to a trusted data set of overnight hotel trip records. We've filtered out a lot of noise of either day trip visitors, people visiting VFR, people coming to the area for what Visit Santa Barbara defines as relatively non-leisure. We actually included geolocation data polygons for specific office buildings that were heavily populated by people visiting from out of town, but that is not the type of trip Visit Santa Barbara is trying to influence, and not staying at a hotel. So we've excluded a number of trip records from their geolocation data set that we couldn't confirm were overnight hotel guests. So when we look specifically, and that's why I can overlay it onto the STR data, because right now we're just looking at the hotel guest visitor. But anyway, with that detail, this makes much more sense. They've seen an increase in their out-of-state visitation month over month. And if we break this down one step further, where we take the California market, and the blue here over time represents just from LA. The yellow is their kind of very close into the Santa Barbara South Coast area local drive markets. Green is all other in-state California. Over time, not just the out-of-state, but also the other California element has been growing over time in terms of the proportion of their overall hotel audience, which is really, really important when it comes to specifically their strategic targeting of when to get back into their out-of-state markets. It's one of Visit Santa Barbara's goals, and I'm sure it's a goal for your destination as well, to best understand when is the right time to get back into their top flight markets. They're obviously not ready yet, especially with California closing its borders again. But this data is going to be really, really impactful in helping them answer that question. The third question that they were able to answer using this data had to do with understanding the visitation to their different types of properties. So we put together a couple different segment profiles for them. So looking at all of the trip records that have touched a hotel overnight in their destination, we can really easily filter to where the origin is, how that's changed over time, and the top trip duration. But most importantly, we can filter to look at what else they're doing in market, what other top attractions. And we also have some polygons for them in this study for transportation methods, train stations, local regional airports, and a couple stretches of highway to really understand how people are getting in and out of the Santa Barbara South Coast area. If we again filter to their most luxury properties, and we could actually filter to a specific property or specific attraction if we wanted to. But I'm just going to show you to look at their most luxury properties. They've definitely seen the strongest visitation from LA, which is true across the board because it's their closest market. But if you look at this over time, and I won't do all the filtering for you right now, but as time has moved on, they've seen the visitation to their non-luxury properties from out of state increase. And this is a really interesting marketing learning point for them, that you know, the luxury properties which are seeing good occupancy is mostly coming from their closest in drive markets from LA and largely from within the state. So seeing those change over time at different rates has been a really, really important learning for them. What I want to kind of then brainstorm with the rest of the group, and this is where I'd love questions and comments in the chat, is where we could go from here, right? Santa Barbara's goal here was to learn about their overnight hotel guests. And so this geolocation data study was specifically designed to help them understand if someone touches a specific hotel polygon, what other attractions are they looking at? What are their top kind of methods of transportation getting in and out? How can we best market to them? What are their, not only where are they from, but how long are they staying in market? And we've given them that ability here. But if they were looking at, say, their just meetings hotels, or if they had a convention center, we're actually looking at another destination right now specifically for all visitation to that convention center, and doing the same type of analysis. But this could easily be done on many different types of travel segments, as long as it had the right, you know, the right parameters so that we could trust the data. And that's kind of the thing that Erin had set up in terms of what we want to talk about in terms of best practices with using geolocation data and how to read it. There are a lot of times where we've heard from clients this frustration element of, you know, I need to know the answer to a very specific question, and this data is not the easiest to work with. As someone who is used to working with very, what I call clean survey data, where people are actually telling us how they're feeling, telling us their behaviors, confirming or not confirming our assumptions about their motivations and why they're visiting and what they're doing in market. Starting to look at geolocation data has presented such an amazingly powerful window into measuring behavior, but so much of the data that we purchase, even just for Visit Santa Barbara, is noise. A lot of it is not leisure travel. A lot of it is not really honestly trustworthy records. I've seen a number of times a trip record where a particular device came into market and then left, but it didn't touch any of the over 150 polygons we're tracking. I couldn't confirm that it was otherwise in market other than that trip record. You know, on behalf of Visit Santa Barbara, we filtered those out to say that the geolocation data set we're looking at in this dashboard right now that we've given them so that they can easily sift through the findings is trusted, is something that we can confirm has multiple data points. And it's been quite an exciting ride to jump into this type of data because it has so much amazing, honestly, amazing findings and potential. So there was a question from Wendy. Did you look at weekday versus weekend? I assume that at least in the summer, occupancy was highest on weekends, and strategically they want to drive weekday. We did actually look at that. Not in this dashboard, but looking at their geolocation data for weekend versus weekday. And interestingly, the biggest difference, Wendy, is from the LA market, which I'm sure is not surprising to you at all. Yes, in normal times, they would be looking to drive weekday travel, and There is a lot of marketing that they're creating, even though they're not pushing it out right now, specifically for that purpose. There was another question from Nandy. Would be interesting to see summer versus other season time periods too. Yeah, and actually that's one of the reasons why we've given Santa Barbara the ability to filter by month or group of months. Because as this goes on, and we're going to be updating this dashboard for them every single month with future travel, hopefully into next year, so that they can see trends on how this is changing over time. It's going to be really, really interesting to compare back and see whether that summer season has actually made that biggest difference. Once you do all the cleaning you just outlined, what percentage of records did you eliminate? Great question, Wendy. It's a lot. In each month, it does vary on the percentage of total records that get eliminated. But I will tell you, just having done it a number of months now, it's the majority of records that get taken out. Now, I will say that specifically to Santa Barbara's trip records that we are filtering, we're only including in their data set trip records that we can confirm touched a hotel overnight. And we defined overnight. Hold on, I have that in my methodology slide for them. We defined overnight evening properties as between the hours of 11 p.m. and 8 a.m. Pacific time. So they had to touch one of their 90-some lodging polygons, and we had them polygon every individual hotel property between those hours in order to count. So for their purposes, it is the majority of records that end up getting taken out. We still have all that raw data, so if they want to go back and look at other travel segments, day trippers, VFRs, we could. But this project is specific to hotel guests. Not to say that we couldn't do it in a different way, but this is the specific case study that we're looking at right now. We are just about at the hour. There's only 5 minutes left. And I've talked a lot. So if there are any other questions, I'm happy to answer them right now, either about our adventures into geolocation data or about the Coronavirus Travel Sentiment Index that Aaron presented. Happy to answer them. If not, you can always email me or Aaron or anyone on our team. We'd be happy to talk more about this. I have to say, for anyone in the audience who's worked with geolocation data before, I applaud you because it is so much work. It is extremely rewarding. It's a very powerful resource, but getting it to a place where you can trust it and rely on it and understand a lot of the findings that it's telling you is intense. I would not recommend doing it on your own if you have the opportunity to avoid that. So anyway, happy to talk more about this project if you want to set up a call with us. Would love to talk to you about what we could do for you. And thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, David.